Hi, sixth grade champions. How are you today? We are continuing our read of Granted and trying to get a head start on it this morning so you have a chance to read early. And we're in a place where our fairy is leaving the haven to go out into the human world pretty quickly and pretty soon to grant a wish. The question is she ready? So, picking up where we left off, page 63, chapter 11. Ophelia had a full talk until dust off, and she wanted to squeeze in a little research before squeezing into her new pink suit. She promised she'd catch up with Charlie before she left. She blamed him, actually. All this talk of bears and alligators had her spooked. She fluttered down to the archives on her beeswaxed wings. Not a waste after all, it seemed. Althea actually liked it down here. All this information at her fingertips, knowledge collected and compiled over centuries. She liked the musty smell of the paper, even if she scoffed at the layers of dust lining some of the shelves. Althea made her way to the section labeled Known Predators. Here were books about everything that might kill you, sorted by region, complete with recommended precautions, self-defense measures, and relative threat levels. Some also came with graphic pictures that prickled the hairs on your neck. She sat down with a heavy tome on the native fauna of the Midwestern United States and flipped through the crisp pages. She was right. There were no wild alligators in Ohio. There were rattlesnakes, however, and several species of raptor, including owls and eagles and peregrine falcons, which could clock in at over 200 miles per hour. Maybe there was some cause to worry. She continued to flip through, making a mental catalog of potential threats. Coyotes, copperheads, brown recluse spiders. Who knew Ohio could be such a dangerous place? She had paused on a picture of a bobcat with a dead rabbit dangling from its jaws when a raspy voice called over her shoulder. Finding everything you need? Ophelia startled. Leaping halfway out of her seat, she turned to find Silas Sequoia Snorer hunched beside her, wheezing and leaning on his wooden crutch. Just about everyone knew Silas, an esteemed archivist and one of the oldest fairies in the haven. Of course, it would be hard not to recognize a fairy with only one ear, the other having been chewed off by a red fox when he was young. Ophelia had heard the story 3 times already. He could still hear fairly well out of the other one, though provided he remembered to dig out the wax. Oh, yes, sir, Ophelia said. I was just looking up common predators of the Midwest. Do you happen to know if bobcats pose a significant danger to our kind? Bobcats, he said. Bobcats. The old fairy often repeated things twice, sometimes to make sure he heard correctly, but mostly because he'd forgotten he said it the first time. Can't say as I've ever met one. Met a wind chime maker named Bob once, though. At least I think his name was Bob. Might have been Frank. Not so good with names anymore, I'm afraid. Ophelia nodded politely. Talking with Silas was a little bit like flying into a stiff breeze. It takes a lot longer to get somewhere, and you're usually exhausted by the effort. Are you thinking about making a wind chime? He asked. No, Ophelia replied. Actually, I'm headed out to grant a wish. It's my first assignment. Ah, Silas Snorer said, his face brightening, hands clasped. A first granting. How marvelous. And what an honor. Thank you, sir. I'm very excited. She rubbed her own hands together. Used to be a grantor myself, back in the day, long before your time. Ophelia didn't doubt it, judging by the wrinkles congregating in every corner and fold of his old fairy face. It was way back in the day. A good amount of magic back then, Snorer continued. Hundreds of wishes every day, more than enough to keep things running at full steam. Not like today, eh? I suppose not, Ophelia said, though if the great tree had dropped only one wish, she would still have been satisfied, provided she was the one sent out after it. What's the wish for, if you don't mind me asking? Agent Fidgets, Sophia answered. Agent Fidgets, he repeated. Fidgets, fidgets. Close enough. The girl wished for a bicycle, she said. And make it purple, Ophelia reminded herself. Silas Snorer shrugged. Bicycle. Well, there are worse things, I suppose, he said. Once did a granting for a little boy who swallowed a quarter on a dare. He wished he had the quarter back, naturally. The old fairy winked a shy wink. So he got it back, naturally. That was a tad too much information. Sophia closed her book with its bloody-mouthed bobcat as a sign that she was finished with her work and ready to leave. But Silas jabbered on. Feels like there should be a better way, though, doesn't it? So many good wishes, and then some nincompoop comes along and swallows a quarter, and his is the one that gets granted. Still, best to let the tree do its job and we do ours, I suppose. Don't fix what isn't broken. Ophelia felt like she just had the same conversation with Squint. She felt like she had had it with quite a few fairies lately. A bicycle's not such a bad wish, she said. Her last one was stolen. Oh, well, that is a shame, Silas mumbled, shaking his head. In that case, I hope you make her happy. I know how it feels to lose something dear to you, though I had my teeth stolen once. Turns out I was just sitting on them. Silas Snorer smiled, showing off his wooden dentures. The problem with old age, you stick around long enough and something's liable to come along and bite you in the butt. Say, did I ever tell you how I lost this ear of mine? Ophelia stood abruptly. If she stuck around any longer, the old fairy might talk both of her ears right off. I'm sorry, you'll have to excuse me. I have to finish prepping for my mission. But thanks for your help, she said, though he hadn't really been much help at all. Nothing of it, Silas repeated, patting her on the shoulder and escorting her to the door. All for a good cause. As she was just about to leave, the old fairy snapped his fingers. Felix! Sorry, Ophelia asked. The wind chime maker, his name was Felix, made the prettiest chimes you ever heard. Sounded like a nest full of nightingales. If you're half as good at granting an old Felix as old Felix was at making wind chimes, you'll be just fine, Agent Fidgets. Don't you worry. It's fidgets, Ophelia corrected. She thanked Silas again for his help, then told him he shouldn't worry either. After all, she had no intention of being half as good as anybody. Ophelia left the archives hastily. Her conversation with Silas had delayed her slightly, but she still had time to make one last stop. It would only take a moment. About halfway down Grant Tower, nestled between floors of bustling offices, sat one quiet, mostly hollow ring, a circular chamber with polished oak walls and a marble slab floor that had been a pain to install, but was cool as crisp snow on bare feet. And Ophelia always took her boots off before entering, afraid that even her footfalls might make too much noise. No one dared to speak in here, not above a whisper at least. A single glow-worm powdered lantern cast the room in somber light. It was the only tranquil space in the otherwise bustling tree. The Ephemeræ, the Hall of Memories. Ophelia came here often, just to sit and be still, to shove her hands in her lap and stop fussing for a moment. Magic might be hard to come by even in the Haven, but this particular room held its own kind of magic. It cast a solemn spell, chanted from the writing on the walls. Names, hundreds of names, carefully carved by a fairy whose only job was to maintain this room and the records it held. Records of great fairies who had given their lives in service to the wish. The ephemeræ was their memorial. Ophelia circled the chamber, grazing her fingers over the carved letters, feeling the scars in the wood, letting her heart ache just a little over each one. Fairies who had accidentally been stranded in a storm, struck by lightning, or drowned at sea. Fairies like Silas, who had been caught by a sneaky fox or cornered by a house cat while digging for a birthday candle, but who, unlike Silas, hadn't managed to escape. Fairies who never came home. Ophelia had heard plenty of stories. One fairy mistaken for a quail, her camo working all too well, shot out of the sky by a hunter. Another who had been momentarily blinded by twin bright beams in the night and struck by a car. It was rare to lose an agent in the field. It hadn't happened since Sophia had joined the guild, but the names on the walls of the ephemeræ were testament to the myriad dangers that awaited her. Most fairies merely drifted away when their course was run, their essence leaving as quietly as it had come and returning to nature, to rain and sun and soil, only to be reborn again in the petals of a primrose or among the needles of a sappy pine. But grantors weren't always destined for a peaceful passing. To be a grantor was to risk life and limb in pursuit of what exactly? It was the one question she asked herself every time she came, and the only time she ever asked it. Why risk your life, as all these fairies did, granting somebody else's wish? Some human's wish. Cassara Quinn was no fairy. She wasn't born from a bellflower or cherry blossom. She might be a darling girl, a tribute to her kind, but that was hardly a reason to stick one's neck out. Althea didn't owe Cassara Quinn anything. So why bother? The answer, of course, was magic. The magic willed it. That's what it was there for, even as the number of wishes they could grant spiraled ever downward. As long as the tree's allotted wishes were granted, the magic would persist. And as long as the magic endured, the haven would endure. And there was also that other thing, that feeling she had yet to experience, but that her fellow grantors spoke of, that sense of pure wonder and joy that you supposedly got when you fulfilled the promise made by the great tree. The fairies had a word for it, that sudden rush. They called it amoratio, the satisfaction of a wish granted. Charlie had tried to describe it for her once, a feeling of wholeness, he'd said, and Ophelia longed to experience it for herself, to say the magic words, to make a wish come true, but not for some girl, or not only for the girl at least, and not just for that feeling either, or for the guild, or to protect the haven, though all those reasons weighed on her heart. She wanted to prove that she could, that she had what it took to be a grantor, one of the best grantors, better than Adelia Brash, maybe even better than Squint. She wouldn't end up like these poor souls. No one would come to the ephemeræ and find her name carved on the wall. Ophelia heard a shuffling step and turned to find Charlie standing in the archway staring at her. Thought I might find you here being all morbid and mopey. I'm being thoughtful, Ophelia corrected, hoping her whisper would remind him not to be so loud. You should try it sometime. Thinking's overrated, Charlie whispered back. I prefer eating puff pastries and taking long naps in the sun. Are you ready? Was she ready? Ophelia took one last sweep of the room, the hundreds of fairies who'd probably asked themselves that same question and thought they'd known the answer, who had had just as much training as she did and probably more experience, yet who didn't return. Maybe Charlie was right. Maybe it was better not to think too hard about such things. Ophelia slipped her boots back on and tied each with a triple knot. I'm ready, she said. It was time to get to work. Okay, we're going to stop there, and tomorrow we'll begin with chapter 12 on page 72. Thank you so much, sixth grade champions. Have a really good day. Take care.